Have you ever wondered what communist dictators thought about America and American history? Well, you might be surprised to learn that they actually really respected and admired some of the early American heroes. So let's take a look at the various different communist leaders throughout history and see what they had to say. So first, let's talk about Mao Zedong. So in 1972, President Richard Nixon became the first U.S. president to visit China, where he met his counterpart, Chinese dictator Mao Zedong. Shockingly, the two became fast friends. During their discussions, Mao and Nixon would often talk politics, of course. And in this, Mao said to Nixon, "We do not like those presidents from Truman to Johnson, but I cast a vote for your election. I like rightists." The Chinese like to use the expression old child to describe old people whose mentality returns to that of their childhood. Mao's feelings toward the United States at this historic moment could well have gone back to his youthful fascination with and admiration of the United States, beginning with George Washington. Jiao San, Mao's friend from his younger days, vividly recalled how Mao sat up all night reading great heroes of the world, translated and compiled from American books, which discusses Wellington, Washington, Lincoln, Rousseau, and Napoleon. But it was Washington who gripped Mao's imagination. "We need great people like these," he said. "We ought to study them and find out how we can make China rich and strong, and so avoid becoming like Korea and India. China is very weak. She will grow strong, rich, and independent only after many years. But the important thing is that we must learn these things. And it's not impossible. After 6 years of hard fighting, Washington defeated the British and began to build up America." Another time Mao expressed his admiration of George Washington was in 1944, when Theodore H. White, an American journalist who studied Chinese history at Harvard, was invited to the personal cave in Yunnan province of Mao. Their conversation proved useless for publication after editing by Mao's aides, but the rest of the morning and a private lunch with Mao and his wife were more agreeable. Mao played the role of an instructor and White that of a student. Seeking to persuade his visitor how the ongoing struggle against his enemies would end successfully, Mao offered a vivid comparison between his China as seen from Yunnan and the American Revolution as it might have looked to a reporter who learned about it from George Washington at Valley Forge. Washington did not have machinery or electricity, Mao observed. The British Army had all those things, but Washington prevailed because of his ideas and because he had the people with him, Mao said. White concluded that Mao had not placed the era of industry or of electrification in their proper centuries, but he got the big picture right. He knew his country. He knew that ideas made people bear guns, and that power was what came out of the muzzle of the gun. In one of his speeches, Mao castigated America for failing to live up to its predecessors. "The U.S. government still has a veil of democracy," he said, "but it has been cut down to a tiny patch by the U.S. reactionaries and become very faded, and it is not what it used to be in the days of Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln." In response to an interviewer alleging that Soviet citizens had an infatuation with all things American, Stalin replied, "You exaggerate. We have no especially high esteem for everything American. But we do respect the efficiency that the Americans display in everything, in industry, in technology, in literature, and in life. We never forget that the USA is a capitalist country. But among the Americans there are many people who are mentally and physically healthy, who are healthy in their whole approach to work and to the job on hand. That efficiency, that simplicity, strikes a responsive chord in our hearts. Despite the fact that America is a highly developed capitalist country, the habits prevailing in its industry have an element of democracy about them, which cannot be said of the old European capitalist countries where the haughty spirit of the feudal aristocracy is still alive." In spite of the fact that feudalism as a social order was demolished long ago in Europe, considerable relics survive in manner of life and customs. There are still technicians, specialists, scientists, and writers who have sprung from the feudal environment and who carry aristocratic habits into industry, technology, science, and literature. Feudal traditions have not been entirely demolished. That cannot be said of America, which is a country of free colonists, without landlords and without aristocrats. Hence the sound and comparatively simple habits in American productive life. Our business executives of working class origin who have visited America at once noted this trait. They relate, not without a certain agreeable surprise, that on a production job in America it's difficult to distinguish an engineer from a worker by outward appearance. That pleases them. In a speech to his countrymen, Stalin said, "Our war for the freedom of our country will merge with the struggle of the peoples of Europe and America for their independence, for democratic liberties." In September 1945, hundreds of thousands of people jammed the French-looking boulevards and streets of downtown Hanoi. They had traveled in oppressive heat from distant villages for the great day. Schools and offices were closed. Jubilant peasants wearing their black pajamas and straw hats, workers, mountain people, militia members carrying spears, Catholic priests in their black suits, and Buddhist monks in their saffron robes all waited excitedly. Banners and flowers adorned the buildings. Flags fluttered in the occasional warm breezes. All faces turned toward the platform erected in Baden Square, a large park near the French residential quarter. Out walked Ho Chi Minh, a frail-looking wisp of a man, who advanced to the microphone. "All men are created equal," he declared, as all of Hanoi listened. "They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." He paused and then elaborated. "This immortal statement," he explained, "was made in the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America in 1776. In a broader sense, this means all the peoples on earth are equal from birth. All the peoples have a right to live, to be happy, and be free." That was not all. Just as Jefferson's immortal vision of unalienable rights and freedoms was followed by a kind of legal brief that documented at length all the abuses committed by King George III and the English Parliament against their American subjects, Ho Chi Minh similarly outlined the grievances of the Vietnamese against France, their colonial master. France burdened the Vietnamese with unjust taxes. France expropriated the people's land, rice fields, and forests. France ruled by decree and not by law. She built prisons instead of schools. Jefferson, toward the end of his great document, had proclaimed that the Americans were dissolving all political ties with Great Britain and declaring their independence. "We, the representatives of the United States of America, do solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states." Ho Chi Minh struggled to recall Jefferson's exact words. "We, the members of the Provisional Government of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, proclaim solemnly to the entire world, Vietnam has the right to be free and independent, and in fact has become a free and independent country." The American Declaration of Independence ends with a pledge taken by all its signers. "And, for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Ho Chi Minh's version of the final pledge encompassed not just the signers, but the whole Vietnamese people. "The entire people of Vietnam," Ho declared, "are determined to mobilize all their spiritual and physical strength, to sacrifice their lives and property in order to safeguard their independence and liberty." Days earlier, Ho Chi Minh and his advisors had been laboring to recall as much of Jefferson's language as they could. Ho had memorized the opening lines of the Declaration when he visited the United States as a menial laborer on a steamer before World War I, but his memory had faded. He wondered if one of the American intelligence officers serving in Vietnam could help. During World War II, James Patty headed the Vietnam mission of the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, the precursor of the CIA. For Patty, Ho Chi Minh was a nationalist, not a starry-eyed revolutionary or a flaming radical. Ho explained to Patty that his draft of the Vietnamese Declaration of Independence needed polishing. He began to read it aloud to him, while someone translated Ho's words as Patty listened carefully. Patty immediately realized that the translator was reading very familiar words. After the translator read a few sentences, Patty turned to Ho in amazement and asked if he really intended to use this text as his Declaration of Independence. Ho sat back in his chair, his palms together with fingertips touching his lips ever so slightly, as though meditating. "Should I not use it?" he asked. Patty was embarrassed. Why should Ho not use it? The translator started again. "All men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness." "Life must come before liberty," Patty remarked. Ho snapped to the point. "Why, of course. There's no liberty without life." Ho pressed Patty for more, but that was all the American could remember. In a letter to American workers after the Russian Revolution, Vladimir Lenin wrote this: "The history of modern civilized America opened with one of those great, really liberating, really revolutionary wars, of which there have been so few compared to the vast number of wars of conquest, which, like the present imperialist war, were caused by squabbles among kings, landowners, or capitalists over the division of usurped lands or ill-gotten gains. That was the war the American people waged against the British robbers who oppressed America and held her in colonial slavery, in the same way as these civilized bloodsuckers are still oppressing and holding in colonial slavery hundreds of millions of people in India, Egypt, and all parts of the world. The American people have a revolutionary tradition which has been adopted by the best representatives of the American proletariat, who have repeatedly expressed their complete solidarity with us Bolsheviks. That tradition is the War of Liberation against the British in the 18th century and the Civil War in the 19th century. In some respects, if we only take into consideration the destruction of some branches of industry and of the national economy, America in 1870 was behind 1860. But what a pedant, what an idiot would anyone be to deny on these grounds the immense, world-historic, progressive, and revolutionary significance of the American Civil War of 1863 to 1865.